so much of feminism was rooted in just individuality, not collective wellness or whatever. Whereas when you look at womanism, it's more about, yes, we're fighting for women's rights, but we're trying to fight for our rights, our collective rights, in a way that's going to ultimately better the whole of us. The feminists, their efforts as a whole, those white women, they was not worried about black women.
Why did we adopt feminism if it wasn't ever born to represent black women?
We are forced to try to operate and exist and live and be in spaces that are not made for us. And at some point we get sick and tired of it. And it's like, you know what? We off that. This is what we're gonna do. And that's basically what happened with womanism, because when you look at like second wave feminism, third wave feminism, they're slowly but surely trying to weave in other aspects of women's struggle, but it still never really prioritized black women. Now, I'm not trying to drag nobody who's a feminist or anything like that. I'm just saying, being real about the history of it, I think that it as a movement to try to fight for rights is great anytime you're trying to do that. But the root of what you're doing was never meant for us, which when you think about America, that's a whole nother conversation, but that's how our society operates.
Why did they want for black women to cover their hair?
Hair, one, was an identifier when it came to maybe what tribe you were a part of. It was a way for you to maintain your connection to your people. And we know that they wanted to snatch that from us. Like, anytime you're able to maintain a level of community and connection. So that's why language was attacked, that family unit was attacked.
Spirituality.
All of that is connected. So anything that was going to maintain connection between black people at that time, there was an effort to strip that away. And that was part of that effort. There's been such an intentional effort to erase our history, you know, and to make our history only be about slavery. But that is not our full and complete story. There's so much more to us than that. For years and years and years, decades, generations, has been hidden, burned, destroyed, so that we can't like stand in that glory and knowing and believing this is who we are, this is the people that we are, and this is what we can continue to be.
Do you feel like that black people are the original people on the planet?
That's a good question. I think
fully connected. Hey, real quick guys, before we get started with the episode, I just want to say thank you for clicking on this video. I've realized the majority of people who watch this podcast haven't yet subscribed to the podcast. So take that time right now to hit that subscribe button and to smash that like button. I really appreciate the support. Now let's get back to the episode. Yeah. Welcome back to the Fully Connected Podcast, your go-to destination for inspirational conversations to help you become your greatest version. I am your host, Chris Jones, licensed therapist and owner of Fully Connected Counseling. Today we got a special guest, all right? She is an educator, storyteller, and holds a Ph.D. in literacy, language, and cultural studies, all right? She's a college professor at the George Mason University and the University of Maryland. Her dissertation focused on racism, colorism, and microaggressions that we black folks have to face in the corporate world, right? She's the founder of a new media company, right, that gives a voice to the black community so we feel heard and so we feel seen, right? Our guest here is all about making it make sense by keeping it plain, right? We had her husband on the show last year. She's a Kelly, all the way from the 757, all right? Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. LaTasha Kelly in the building.
Thank you so much. That was such an amazing intro. Thank you.
Definitely. So I do a little research.
Yes.
So can you start off by telling everybody what your shirt is here, Therapy Period? Some people might think you're a therapist.
Right. So I'm glad you said that, because I always make sure when I'm doing vending events or just random places I'm at the gathering, sometimes people will come up and be like, oh, are you a therapist? And I love that in the sense that there's a need clearly for more black therapists. We're looking for people who look like us to help us. But I want to make it clear that I'm a mental health advocate, but I'm not a therapist. And
for sure,
that's important for me because a lot of the work that I do, workshops and speaking engagements, and even when I'm just teaching, is rooted in just wanting us to be well.
Absolutely.
but I can only take you so far, right? So I want to get you to where you can really, I'm not trying to lead nobody astray.
Yeah, man.
But for me, this was about a lot of the sayings that I have on my merch. It's just things that I say to myself, that I say to my students. And for me, therapy has been such a game changer.
Right.
And so when I think about, if somebody were to ask me, like, how have you, been able to grow or move forward beyond certain experiences and stuff like that? One, the Lord, but two, therapy, period.
Definitely. Therapy, period. Definitely. So at the end of the day, I think really a lot of times people think, oh, I don't need therapy or I'll just pray on it. But I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you brought that up. And we talked about briefly too, like how you said recently, about 2 years ago, you were diagnosed with ADHD. I told you a little bit. I struggle with a little bit of that as well. So I don't know if you feel comfortable sharing about that.
Oh yeah, if anybody who knows me knows I be oversharing, but about 2 or so. My friends and people who really know me, it's like if you know, like we already knew what time it was, right? But actually, once I got out here, I found a doctor. I was just trying to rebuild my care team coming out here. And I got the official diagnosis. And something that I don't talk about as often, but I think it's important to, I just believe in the power of storytelling and sharing our lived experiences in terms of helping others. So around that same time, I also received my autism diagnosis. And I think that's important because historically, and just across society and media, we typically see one image of what autism can look like or can be, what the experience is. And that has done us a disservice because it's a spectrum and we hear that. But I think a lot of times we don't really fully understand what that means.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think about, I don't know if you're familiar with Amanda Seales, but she's a actor, comedian, podcast host, but she was on Insecure.
Okay.
I think her character was Tiffany, if I'm not mistaken, but she was the one, she played in AKA. But at any rate, she came out recently and shared that she is on the spectrum, and she received so much backlash because people were just like, generally speaking, some people just don't care for her. And so they were like, I think merging their personal feelings for her, though they don't know her personally, with also ignorance around what autism is and what we've been shown, what it has been displayed as in movies and on TV shows and stuff. And so I say all that to say that it was really, like the ADHD part, been known that, right? But getting that official diagnosis, it opens you up, I think, to having more conversations around it, learning more about yourself, just being able to put, like, as we say, name it, get tools and resources. And so it was the same for learning about the autism diagnosis.
Awesome. My son, he's on the spectrum as well. Very mild autism, but I try to say the same thing to his mother all the time because she was a little bit in denial about it, right? And, it's interesting to put that out because, obviously I'm a therapist. When I do therapy, I had to call a parent the other day. I was like, I do believe that your son, he might be on the spectrum, but usually when I tell parents that, they get, defensive or in denial, but it's like, you got a lot of people who are, from Chris Rock to Elon Musk, who deal with this, right? But, I wanted to talk about some of the stuff that you have going on about the bookstore that you have that's out, right? The Left on Red, so if you could talk about the bookstore, like, because first of all, the name is super dope.
Thank you.
Left on Red, which, obviously happens to people.
So really the name of the store came from, we know what it means in terms of texting and stuff, but I mentioned, so if you look at the sign in anywhere, socials or whatever, it's Left on Red, home of the Millennial Black Professor and TMBP Media. And that's because once we're open, all things TMBP Media the Millennial Black Professor will be housed out of Left on Red. And so looking at like all the work that I do, we talked earlier about, I just want us to be well as a people.
Right.
And for me, that looks like whatever we're doing, whether we are embarking on a new business or it's in our 9 to 5 or as parents or whatever roles that we play, how can we show up and just be well? And And I just think that that's not something that's really focused on. Typically, we're just so busy, like going and having to show up for.
Really do.
Yeah. So I talk about that in some way, shape, or form in anything that I'm doing. Like I said, I don't care what class I'm teaching, and I don't just teach Black people, but it's important for me with my students to, instill that in them too, that as you are pursuing this degree, how can we set you up for success to do it from a space of wellness and well-being? Right. So I bring all that up to say that when people come into Left on Red, it's like I want the mindset to be, this is a space where we're leaving stuff on red that is no longer serving us, that is not contributing to our well-being. So when you step in, it's like, what are you leaving on red today?
Okay, I like that. So it's a bookstore.
It's a bookstore.
And it's mostly Black books?
Yeah, so it will be featuring Black authors. And one of the things I'm excited about is, like, I love science fiction, dystopian literature, so like Octavia Butler, things like that. And so I'm like, I want to I think that sometimes when we talk about Black authors pigeonholed in to certain categories, and it's that same type of like book that we're reading. So I want to expose the community to other types of genres that Black authors are great at writing these stories, but also featuring local Black authors as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And then offering programming in the space too that's around wellness and just joy and laughter and happiness and things like that. And then it will also be where we're recording Black in One Piece.
All right, that's what's up. And that name is dope too.
Black
in One Piece. There you go. But on your podcast, right, I wanted to talk a little bit about that because I definitely tuned in and locked in watching the episodes. Like you said, it's pretty much where academia meets Black culture, right? Let's talk about the podcast and your friend Amber, who motivated you to start it, right?
We were just texting this morning because we have been having a hard time getting our schedules together to connect. But it's one of those friendships where whenever we do connect, it's like no time has passed. So yeah. I love Amber. But so a couple years ago, I was thinking about doing. This really goes back to the root of in the start of the Millennial Black Professor. It was height of the pandemic, we in quarantine. So I really wasn't thinking about a business per se. I just had this, to me, cool name come to mind, the Millennial Black Professor. And when I started thinking about what I could do with that, I was in a space where I had gotten my research from my dissertation published, but it was through one of the faculty in my program. He was putting out an edited volume. Okay. So I didn't have to necessarily go through a lot of the usual rigmarole around submitting to an academic journal. And then, a lot of times when it's researched, it's supposed to be peer reviewed, which makes me think of like jury of your peers, when a lot of times it's really not your peers, in terms of they don't look like you, they don't have experiences that you've had. And so when they're reading research that you've done about your population, sometimes there's disregard in terms of, it doesn't rise to a certain level of rigor, or it's just not important. Who really is gonna. I was even told during my program, doing the research that you mentioned earlier, like, you're not gonna go far with that in academia. So just having all of that swirling, I'm first and foremost, the people who I really want to get this information to, that's who I care about, you know. And I know for me, if it wasn't for me being in all these different academic programs, I'm not just sitting around picking up an academic journal to read. So I started thinking, like, how can I really reach my people, or just people who are genuinely interested in these topics, in a way that's accessible? And so that's when I was thinking, like, I could do a podcast or a blog. I've always been a pretty good writer. And so I created Life Undissertated. That was the original podcast concept. And I put out some episodes, and they were really well received, but I just didn't have I was working full time still. And like, again, the idea of being a business owner was like the furthest thing from my mind. And so I had to just let that go to the side. But it was then that I was being really intentional about, I want to make sure that I'm still bringing in the research and like the evidence-based information. But again, we don't have to use all these, big words that nobody for real knows. That just unnecessary, like all this jargon. Right. I just want to talk to my people. And so that started there. So fast forward, when I'm doing Black in One Piece, I still wanted to maintain certain elements of that, even though the concept is somewhat different, but still being able to incorporate and tie it back to the research that's been so important and pivotal to me in my career.
Making it make sense by keeping it plain,
Exactly.
you know? And so that's what we want to do today. So like, what would you tell everybody exactly? Because you're a professor. What do you do full time for work exactly?
So up until October of last year, I worked a traditional 9-to-5. So I started my career working in college admissions. So I was doing my work study through federal student aid in the Office of Admissions at my undergraduate institution.
Okay.
That changed the trajectory of my life because I'm a first-gen college grad. And so being a first-gen student, I really didn't know what I was doing. Like I made it to campus and then I was just floating along confused. But thankfully, I was able to, through different, like being in work study and joining different organizations, I gained mentors along the way. And so I realized that I really enjoyed working in admissions, working with students and parents who were trying to figure it out. Like I had just been trying to figure it out with my mom. And that put me on my path to working in higher ed. And so from admissions, I went on to work almost a decade for the U.S. Department of Education. I was working for federal student aid, funny enough. But I knew most of my time working there that I didn't enjoy it, like, because there's really no direct student contact, and that's where I really think I thrive and feel the most fulfilled. But I did that for almost a decade, and then as I was moving out here, they were allowing us to still work remotely because of COVID. Okay. And so I was still working there. Once I got pretty settled here, I started looking for other work. And so my last full-time job was working for College Board, so the organization that does like the AP test and the SAT. Right. So they were in the process of rolling out the new AP African American Studies course, and they needed individuals that looked like us to be able to talk about the course to colleges and try to convince them and get them on board with offering credit to students who got a certain test score. So that's what I had been doing up until October of last year. And it was around then that I made the leap, a little sooner than expected, but I made the leap to full-time entrepreneurship. So my full-time job now is it's multifaceted, but so I teach, like you mentioned. So I think I'll always teach, like be an adjunct professor or part-time somewhere, because I just thoroughly enjoy that. It's an opportunity to like kind of immediately see when you've made an impact on a student. So for George Mason, I teach, it's synchronous, so we have to actually join live. And even though most of the students are just like black boxes, you always have a couple that will show their faces, which I'm like, thank y'all so much. But I don't mind it because I get it. Like, who's trying to be on all day long? It's just like work. But the few that are on, and even just the engagement in the chat and the, you know, them using the reactions and all of that, like I appreciate all of that. And
so it's remotely at the both universities. So then so that's the kind of the full-time, the meat and potatoes right there.
I mean, I would say that's half of it now, though. Because I was doing that even when I was working 9 to 5 full time, but now it's supplementing as I'm still transitioning into building up clientele and stuff like that. So I just closed out a contract with the United Negro College Fund. So I was brought on to develop curriculum and facilitate the curriculum for their new social justice scholars program. And then I've just been picking up different speaking engagements. I'm a licensed imposter syndrome institute facilitator. So I've done some of those workshops, and just like I've always taught and talked about imposter syndrome, but getting more of a foundation to be able to weave it into some of the things I already talk about. So
what would you say that is? Like if somebody's watching, they say they don't know exactly what, you know, by like as you say, making it make sense by keeping it plain. What's imposter syndrome to those folks watching?
I would say that it is basically you having done the work and being a lot of times overly qualified, beyond well qualified and ready and experienced, and still showing up in spaces feeling like you don't belong, like you shouldn't be there. Why did they pick me? How did I get selected? That's it in a nutshell. Like always feeling like a fraud and like you don't belong. And the research shows that it impacts a wide array of people, but there's higher percentages when it comes to individuals of color, marginalized people. And that makes sense when you think about how our society works and the messaging that has been put out and how we then sometimes internalize that.
Definitely. I wanted to talk about, like, because when I was listening to the podcast, you talked about you had a time where you had a mentee that kind of helped you kind of get through, when you were feeling down,
Oh my
and
goodness.
At that time you probably would think like, why me? Like, why do you want to pick me to be your mentor? So, if you could share a little bit about that and what was going on.
Yeah. So at that time I had lost 2 jobs in a row. Right. And being someone who had been, as they say, quote unquote, gainfully employed since I was like 14, 15, 16, I was always working to help the family, to help my mom. My first like real job was at Baskin Robbins. I love ice cream, y'all, but
oh man,
but part of it is because of that.
Ice cream last night.
But yeah, and so it was such a part of my identity. That was a real blow to me. Like now I'm in a totally different space, but then for the first time, not having a job, not feeling like I could take care of myself, that was a blow. And then this is a story that I tell because it was so impactful to me. I lost the first job, and I know that it was due to no like fault of my own in terms of not performing or whatever. It was a prime example of an individual feeling threatened by just my presence, because anyone who knows me knows I show up just being me, right? And I want to support the people who, if I have employees or whatever, and I'm a ride for my people, and that's what it was, and that was not received well. And that's a very, very like Cliff Notes version. But I say all that to say that I didn't feel bad about losing the job because I knew I hadn't done what I was supposed to do.
Right.
It just was, again, I just felt like, man, now what? So I'm praying. Because they had done me dirty, I ended up getting it wasn't a severance. They didn't call it a severance, but essentially that's what it was, where they were paying me out for like a year from that point. And so the Lord had taken care of me in that way. Instead of me just being still and just allowing that to keep me, and not saying that I couldn't look for anything, but not being like so stressed and pressed about it. Oh, I was stressed and pressed. I was like, I got to find me another job. I have a whole year now that I could be a little bit chilling, because this is me coming off the heels of finishing my doctoral program and everything. Right. Like I hadn't graduated yet, but I had finished all of my requirements and stuff. So I really could have just taken that time to rest. But again, this is pre-therapy. So I don't even know what rest, is for real. I feel like I got to always be doing something. So I pressed and hurried up and got this other job. One of the worst decisions. It was even more toxic than that first situation. And that was the second job that I lost. Boom, boom, right, one behind the other. And when I reflected back, I was like, if I could have just been still. I did not have to rush and take that job. So for me, it just was... it was an example. So now when I find myself in those situations, I'm like, I remind myself to be still.
Yeah.
And if you say you're going to have faith, and how they say pray about it and all of that, like it's finding that balance between like, yes, faith without works is dead. So yes, I pray about it, and you got to also work in accord with your prayers, but also being still. Like you got to find that right the balance of it all. But that's kind of what was going on at that time. And when I met with the mentee, it was right after I had lost the first job, and I just mentally wasn't in a good place.
Definitely. So you lost a job right before earning your Ph.D.
Yep.
Wow. Wow. And then there was a time you thought about moving back in with your pops.
I did move back in with him. Yeah. And so even that, you take me back now. Okay.
Yeah, we go back. We dive deep.
Even that was matter of fact, now that I think about it, when I met with her, so she had reached out to me before I moved back in with my dad. By the time we actually were able to coordinate, because I was living in the Richmond area, she was still in Newport News. My dad lives in Hampton. So anyone who's familiar with the area, once I got to my dad's, I was closer to where she was. And so I'm at my dad's at that point, and I think that probably played a role too in why I was just so off when I met with her, because I was at my dad's. My dad and I don't have the best relationship, and so it was just it's my dad, and then he's his wife, and then her children didn't really live there, but they made it a point to be there when they knew that I was having to come back. So just the whole experience of it all was like it was just tough. It was hard. to be back in that space and to, I mean, I was raised a certain way, so I'm never going to be disrespectful. Now, let me, I don't mean that in the sense that you just let people disrespect you and you don't.
Right, you gotta be able to say
no. But I
no.
mean in the sense of, I knew going into that situation, this is my dad's house. He's now married to this woman, whether I care for her or not. And so I'm in need of support and help at this time. So just mentally having to prepare myself for that. And
how young were you at that time?
Let me see. So I'm trying to think. I graduated in 2015. So what's that? Almost 10 years ago. So I was around 30ish, I think.
30ish.
Yeah.
Definitely.
29, 30. And
was that like, would you say like a low point for you?
I would say that whole period was probably the lowest point. Like, I won't say the lowest, but it was a low point mentally for me, because the other piece of it was so after I went ahead and took that second job when I shouldn't have, and then lost that one, now I'm in a space where I'm applying. And I was in this weird space of like, you're overqualified. Like, you're about to have a PhD. You know what I mean? Like, why are you looking at this job? I just need a job. You know what I mean? So I'm applying for a whole bunch of things that I wasn't really being strategic about it. I was just applying for things. And I can see how as a hiring manager, you might look at it like, why do you want this? And I actually did get at the kind of the tail end of the situation. I got someone from one of the local community colleges to take a chance on me and hire me, in terms of when I ended up telling her I got this other job. She was like, I knew this was going to happen. She said, but I felt like you would really bring something, to the role or whatever. But she said she understood. But anyway, that's what I kept running up against. And so when you're already at a low point, it's like, even though logically, it takes a while to get a job sometimes, or it doesn't come immediately, or you're going to, even though you know that, when you're in that low space, it just was even more of a blow after blow after blow. The other piece was, this was the first time in my life, the first job that I lost, that I had really gotten into a routine of, okay, I was probably the healthiest I've ever been at that time, because I was enjoying my work. I was working in admissions, which I love, working with students. A couple of my employees were former student employees of mine, or we worked together in the Office of Admissions at my undergraduate institution. So it was just like family coming back together. I knew another one of the people on campus from my master's program. Nice. So we all got along really well. I had ended up getting a gym membership, and I got into a routine, which is so important for me in my ADHD. Like, so I would leave work, go to the gym, do a class, go home. And so I was just feeling good. I was looking good, all this kind of good stuff. And so to have that, like, just like that.
And this is post-therapy or?
Just pre-therapy now.
It's pre-therapy
Yeah.
now.
So I'm like, just to have that. I think if I had been in bed, I would have been so much better off. Oh, yeah. It still would have been a blow. But so just all of that being snatched away. So you're talking about the working out and stuff. Yes, being physically good, but I know it was doing wonders for my mental too. And not to say that I couldn't still go to the gym once I lost the job, but it was the routine. Like, losing that routine. Now I'm just home all day. I'm eating my worries away.
Get that ice cream.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm eating. Applying, not getting the jobs, maybe getting an interview, not getting the job. Like, so it was just a cycle.
That's tough.
And I slowly see my money like dwindling. Ooh. And so I realized I was going to have to ask my dad if I could.
Yeah, man. I remember there was a period when I lost a job and I was unemployed for about a month. So I remember how that struggle is, man. So it's a low point. But it's interesting because I realized if I didn't get fired from that job, I probably never would have started my own practice. Mm-hmm. So I'm guessing, through that low point, through that valley, there had to be a peak. So what would you say? What was some of the good that came out of that low period of time,
I would say just one, lessons learned, right? Because I that's something that I never did again in terms of moving too fast. Just really trying to be mindful of
being still.
Being still, but also I think this is a good idea. But just because I think it's a good idea doesn't mean that that's what the Lord has for me. So just thinking about those things, praying for discernment, alignment. But also the relationship that I gained with my mentee, like the fact that she stuck it out with me, because I feel like if I had met me at that time, I would have probably gone back to the man that referred her to me and been like, I don't know if this is a good fit, But it's like now, all these years later, she celebrated my birthday with me for the first time, in terms of like, now she grown, you know what I'm saying? So she came and met me and my friends, and I was like, I don't know how it's gonna be, you know, but I should have known. Like, my friends just embraced her, and it was just a wonderful experience. So I think that's one of the high points. Also, just being able to reflect on myself as a mentor. And I'll always say, like, I don't even have my life together, so I don't know why somebody would want me as a mentor. But seeing the trajectory of our relationship and how she has also mentored me, you know what I mean, in different ways. Like, it's just a reminder.
I mean, I feel like nobody wants that perfect mentor. Anyways, you know, you want to be able to be real authentic, you know, especially us as Black folks, you know. And I wanted to talk about a little bit too, like, because in the podcast you talked about Black body politics, which is something that's new to me. But you also said something that I was reminded of. You said back in the slavery time, the slave owners sometimes would tell Black women to cover up their hair. Something I didn't even know about. Is this kind of where a lot of things started, like, for sometimes in our community with just like insecurities with our hair? Like, tell me more about that. Like, yeah,
I mean, so much of the way we show up right now, it can be rooted back to the way things were back then. And I think also a lot of the things that we have shame around and that we've been told are bad about us also go back to things that were actually revered about us, but they don't want nobody to know that. You know what I'm saying? Right. So it's like, we got to shut that down, you know, and then unfortunately it's generationally passed on, not just interracially, but some of it intraracially as well. And that's where we get to see some of the things that we do amongst ourselves when it comes to colorism in particular.
Why did they want for Black women to cover the hair?
So I think what you were referencing is when I was talking about, it was a study I read where they talked about the ways that our hair was used in terms of messaging and things like that, how we were able to braid it up into different styles, and we used what do you call it? Not seeds, but I can't think of beans and all these kind of different things. And so you'll read about how hair was used for hair. One was an identifier when it came to maybe what tribe you were a part of. It was a way for you to maintain your connection to your people. Right. And we know that they wanted to snatch that from us. Like, anytime you're able to maintain a level of community and connection. Right. So that's why now, like, language was attacked, that family unit was attacked, and
spirituality,
all of that is connected. So that was part of it. But then, and for me, I know there's more to this than that, so I don't want to go too deep into it and be telling people falsehoods. But also, you hear the stories about how it was also used as a means of communication, and so anything that was going to maintain connection between Black people at that time, there was an effort to strip that away, and that was part of that effort.
Man, why do you think they wanted to strip that away from us?
Because anytime that we can continue to communicate and gather, this is one of the things I talk about in the podcast. I talk about peak Blackness, and for me, it being a time when we just are like, "Ooh, I love us, and I love being Black." And a lot of the people that I talked to last year, the response is always centered around gathering and community, and whether we know each other or not. I was just telling somebody, we could be on a train station platform and don't know any of the other Black people, but they start playing Before I Let Go. We finna on this platform do the electric slide, like all together. And so, but it's those types of, like, it's just, we know, you know.
And I remember, like, on your podcast with Dr. Kevin Harrison, he talked about too, like, you can just have a handshake or just a look, you know. And to me, like, when I feel like that, I feel like Black folks, we have like almost like a sixth sense, you know. Like, even like some people believe like our hair is like a way how we can tap into the divinity, to the source, to like different spirituality aspects, or even Rastafarian, who believe, like, you know, keeping the dreadlocks, man, long and whatnot, for those same reasons, to connect back to nature or even to God. Some might feel like, you know.
And then you have to also think about there are times when, man, I don't want to get too deep into it, but
we go deep. Let's go.
My line sisters and I, we are doing research and been doing presentations and things around unlearning the Black church model on mental health, and we have predominantly focused on Black women. But one of the things we've talked about is how in the Black church, and this is not saying every single Black church, we know that, but how oftentimes Black women are told to cover up, and the onus is placed on a Black woman to have to account for a man's wandering eye or inappropriate behavior toward her. And so I bring that up because it makes me think also of the hair. There's also a lot of historically that being at play when you talk about the covering of the hair as well. Right. Not for Black men in that instance, but we know that our women were being raped and assaulted and things like that. And instead of acknowledging that their men were doing this violence against us, white women would turn their anger and ire, so to speak, toward Black women. And so that also played a role in how we were forced to show up and cover up in different ways.
Have you ever read the ISIS Papers? Mm-mm. Man, it's a good book, but like pretty much what she says, the author passed away. It was a Black lady. I'm going to mess up the name, but anyways, the premise pretty much is just like the belief at the core of white supremacy is that they realize that they're genetically recessive, meaning that, the more that they integrate with Black folks or people of color, their race would no longer prolong. Mm-hmm. So like we have to develop certain systems to keep color folks out if we want to prolong our race. Mm-hmm. Like that's at the core of it. Just like, Steph Curry, Drake, Obama, have white mothers, but they look Black, so if it's something for some reason, God made our genetics dominant, and that's not saying we're better or anything, but just the science shows that, you can tell, like even somebody who's albino or very pale skin is more proper way to say, like they still look Black, and I wanted to bring up too, because you brought up Sarah Baartman, and when I was listening, I was like, man, I haven't heard that name in a while, but now I was thinking like, man, like now going to Instagram, seeing everybody with these Brazilian butt lifts and everything like that, do you feel like now, like with the whole Sarah Baartman, if you could kind of explain to people like who she was and why they looked at her, but now I feel like almost nowadays, like are we just, our culture have several different Sarah Baartmans out here just willingly.
So Sarah Baartman, she was a Black woman who basically was put on display because of her features. Yeah. Her you can if you Google, you can find drawings or sketches of like her bottom being larger and just various aspects of her body, though you can imagine the way that many Black women are shaped in comparison to how
a more European
right
body type, right?
Yes, basically was like she was on display in a grotesque kind of way, you know what I mean, like people for charging
like
people and so I talk about us being othered and dehumanized, and so it's like it was like she was an animal on display, honestly, in a zoo, literally. Wow. And they're charging people to come and see her, and
was it against her will? Obviously.
Against her will. And what disgusts me is that even after her death, she was put on display. They had like her portions of her body were put on display for many, many, many years, and it wasn't until like recent decades where there was some intervention done, and that ended. But it's like to know that she couldn't even rest, in death, that they still were using her in that way. But I don't necessarily know that I think it's the same as women like these days when they're getting the augmentations to their body and everything, because when we talk about one, that was her natural makeup and everything, and she also did not have a choice about being on display like that. Right.
It wasn't her will, right?
Yeah, I can't remember all the details of the transaction that occurred that got her in that situation, but at the end of the day, who was trying to be on display like that? For real. And on top of that, let's say for whatever reason you did want to be, but you're not receiving any of the compensation or anything from that, which I think does kind of mirror we hear stories all the time about Black women in the industry who are not fairly compensated, but expected to do, and that runs across really any,
especially like in the acting or music industry.
Exactly.
You see, like, they almost like, it seems like to me, like when I saw or was reminded of Sarah Baartman, I thought of different like female rap artists or just like singers too, or even like a Kardashian, if you will, you know.
Now, but to your point, the things that they feel like they have to do in order to get ahead and everything. But going back to the people who, I don't know, it's a blurred line for me, because the women, on the one hand, I would say like, oh, but it's the choice, it's their choice, right?
Right.
But I believe that for some, we know it's a choice in terms of they make the decision to make the appointment and da-da-da-da-da. But in terms of some people are so susceptible and swayed by societal expectations that I believe that for some, they do feel like they have to do this in order to, whether it's for their romantic prospects or to get ahead in other areas of life. So I don't know, but I can't say that I would make a direct connection.
Right. I think that's fair to say.
I gotta dive a little deeper into that.
You know, and like what you're like we were saying, like the pressures of just being a woman, but let alone a Black woman, like, you know, how do you deal with these pressures, even like whether it be the microaggressions in the workplace or just like the way that, you know, you might look different, obviously, than the European counterparts. Yeah.
So these are conversations that I've been having with the Black women that I've interviewed for Black in One Piece. And now the place that I'm in, like the last job I was in was super toxic, very toxic. And in large part, it was because of the microaggressions. And I don't even like to call them microaggressions because they're not micro a lot of times.
Yeah. What's a better name for it? Because these people are touching hair. So
that's assault. So I had a professor, one of my dissertation co-chairs. I remember like yesterday, I was sitting in a class, like observing, just for my program, her teaching a Black hair and body politics course. And she talked about when someone does that, touches your hair without permission, reaches out and pets you, basically, it's assault. And I had never really thought about it in that way. But she was saying, when you think about your body's reaction a lot of times, in terms of, you know, who is just wanting to be touched without permission, number one, like, you know, and then two, especially when it's in a space like the workplace. I've had it happen to me, and it's like you're so angry or you're so annoyed, frustrated. One, I don't know where your hand's been. I don't want you touching me. I'm a germaphobe, so it's like it's so much up in that. But I know in this professional space, I can't just haul off and like hit you. I can't haul off and like push you away for real. I could, but then are you gonna start crying and saying that I assaulted you, and now you're the victim instead of me? Like I had a situation where this was someone who was on my staff, and I was getting ready to lead a meeting. I walked in, and I think I had my hair in braids, but when I came in, I had it in a puff. It was in a fro, but I had it in a puff. And soon as I sat down, she's like grabbing in and touching my hair and everything. And that, and one of the,
this is a coworker or supervisor?
This is she worked for me actually, but but either way, it's just the fact that like you just don't do that. And so one of the other staff, who was someone from my school, he knew me. He was like, after the meeting was over, he was like, this is a white guy. He was like, Tasha, he said, I was praying for you. He was like, because I knew. And I said, but this is what I'm talking about. Like now I still have to go and lead this meeting. I cannot stop and go, you know what I'm saying? But I had all the feelings going on inside.
What did you do?
So in the moment, I just moved away, and then I had to go ahead and because by then other people had come in. I had the meeting, but I actually called a meeting with her, just me and her. And I explained to her and gave her like historical context around why that was not appropriate. And I felt it was important to do that. I didn't feel like I needed to go to HR and all of that. I didn't think if she had done it on multiple occasions, then yes.
Yeah, for sure.
But with this being her first time, and I ain't had no other problems with her, I felt like it was, as they say, a teaching or teachable moment. Like I felt like I could use this to, and not that I think it's our responsibility to do that, but because it was my personal experience and I wanted to let her know, don't do that to me again. That's why I chose to handle it in that way. And it didn't happen again. And what frustrates me sometimes with white people, especially white women, is that they do not want to take accountability. So her initial reaction was, oh, I have curly hair too. And oh, I touch my sister's hair all the time. Well, I'm not your sister, you know, and your curly hair is not my curly hair. Like we ain't the same. So just they're so on guard and on defense of not wanting to be called racist or called out or whatever, that sometimes there's a block up to just, even when they're being approached, hey, you know what I'm saying? I'm not coming at you in the way that a lot of times you stereotypically will assume that I would approach you. I'm just talking to you calmly or whatever.
Right.
And even then, it's still not received well. So
why do you feel like it's hard for sometimes white people to take accountability when it comes to topics like this?
I mean, at the end of the day, because they don't want to be labeled a racist. I mean, it's and because it's one of those things where this is why I don't like the term microaggression sometimes, because it allows for people to get away with stuff more so than if we just called a thing, as Iyanla would say, that it's racist.
Because you almost feel like there's that entitlement of like, you own this, so you can just touch it whenever you want. Like, this is exactly, or I'm above you, so I can go ahead and touch this because you're not going to do nothing about it.
I was going to say, I think it's more even about they know it's not going to be any repercussions for doing it.
I was curious, like, what do your professor and whatnot, what do they say? Because I'm assuming they probably were white.
So I was in an interdisciplinary program. So the program inherently had you kind of pulling from different programs, sometimes even to piece together like your committee members.
Yeah.
So when I entered my program, I had said I was going to just continue the research I did in my master's program, which was around first generation Black students at PWIs, because that was also my experience. But the summer leading into my doctoral program is when I did the big chop, cut all my hair off. That's a whole nother story. But what I experienced going through that, like the reactions that I got from Black security guards that I had to pass every day at work, and then older Black women on my job, it had me thinking about when I was working in admissions, the students that the young Black women students, teens that I would come into contact with, they would be so excited when they would see somebody that I guess they consider professional or a businesswoman, who I'm wearing my hair in braids. I wasn't natural at the time, but I always was wearing my hair in braids or something like that.
Yeah.
And so just kind of being able to show them that as it's professional. But they would tell me sometimes, because we're talking about schools and stuff, but inevitably we start talking about other stuff. And they would tell me stories sometimes about just things that of the boys that they were interested in or whatever would say about their hair if they did come with a fro or puffs or whatever. And so I was like, man, if I'm this big age or whatever, and and having to still deal with this, but I'm old enough and have enough agency where I'm able to handle it. But you don't necessarily have that when you are in your teens or in undergrad. And so that was around the time I decided to change my topic.
Right.
And that was not an issue, but they had faculty that could work with me on the first gen stuff, PWI stuff, but not on that. And so I ended up having to, I pieced together my committee. So one of my faculty was from the history department. She was the chair of the history department, Black woman. I also had a sociology professor on my committee, Black woman. And then I had my co-chair, she was in the American Studies department, Black woman.
Yeah.
And then I had an external member who was a mentor of mine from my master's program, Black man. So there was only actually one white person on my committee, and she was the other co-chair, because I had to have somebody from my department.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I pieced that together.
Let's say there's somebody of a Caucasian descent watching right now, and they're a little confused about our culture, or just like some of the things you're talking about. Like, what would be the best way that you would say, like, what they need to know about us as Black folks? Obviously, you're not the whole spokeswoman for Black people, but like maybe something that you've always feel like you try to explain to them and they didn't understand.
I would say the number one is that we're not a monolith, like you said.
Yeah.
So just making sure, but I feel like that has become like a buzz phrase kind of sort of. And so it's like, do you really get what that means? That means not putting us on the spot, in meetings to speak for or account for the entire, Black population or all of the Black employees at this company, things like that. So actually putting it into practice. So to me, that goes back to cultural competence. I think that cultural competence is lacking in a big way across many organizations. So where they have these DE&I efforts that for many sprung from everything that happened in 2020. Maybe some of them were doing it before, but a lot of them started after 2020. And it's like, okay, cool. I'm glad you're doing something, but I don't want it to just be performative. And that's what a lot of it is. And with it being performative, they're not digging deeper into cultural competence, which would keep you from looking at one of us as being able to be a spokesperson for all of us. Also, it would keep you from feeling like you can just reach out and touch somebody,
right.
you know, things like that, and not getting offended when you're told not to do that. And so I think, and then the other thing is the removing the expectation that we have to educate you. Again, it was my choice to have that conversation with that particular person, but generally speaking, there's so many other things that we are burdened with just off the strength of the color of our skin, that another one of the things on our to-do list should not be having to educate you on whether it's our history or our culture, and things like that. And so just like you would pick up a book on any other topic that you find yourself interested in, to move beyond the performativeness. There's so many texts and authors, academics or not, that you can tap into. Movies, if that's not if reading isn't your thing, because I know it's not for everybody, movies that you can watch, documentaries.
Right, you can re-educate yourself if you really want to. Because I remember, like, it's crazy because when I started my own practice about 4 years ago, well, now 5, there was this guy there. I know he was racist. It was an older white gentleman. And he would come into like the office, and at the time I had like a picture of LeBron, Kobe, and he would just say weird things and ask me questions like, have you ever dealt with oppression, or just like weird things. He would just pop in there, like when I'm already got clients in the lobby asking me questions, and I'm like, Jim, I'm like, it sounds like to me you don't have much black friends. I said, let's go out to lunch. You know, because you just need a black friend. I feel like some of these white folks just don't have any black friends.
Yeah.
So then, like, if they had a black friend, maybe their black friend might let them touch their dreadlocks. Who knows? But now you see a black person at work, and you never see them in that close proximity, right? And then they want to try to touch your hair.
But
you know, do you feel like that black people are the original people on the planet?
That's a good question. I think if you probably did ask my husband this, but I think he would certainly say yes. And I have to say,
because if we're not, then who is?
I think, I don't know, was it you? Somebody I was talking to, we were just talking about the way that the Bible characters are talked about, you know, and so the hair and the skin complexion. So when I think about it from that perspective, I would have to say yes, because who are we talking about if not us? So that's really all I have on that.
You know, because I mean, it's just like, it's not to, once again, to say like we're better than people, but I think it's just, for me, it's like almost like a responsibility.
But that speaks to why there's been such a intentional effort to erase our history, you know, and to make our history only be about slavery. There is struggle in our story. That's just a fact. But that is not our full and complete story. I wouldn't. There's so much more to us than that. That for years and years and years, decades, generations has been hidden, burned, destroyed.
Right.
So that we can't like stand in that glory and knowing and believing this is who we are, this is the people that we are, and this is what we can continue to be.
Right. Because even like in the Bible, like in Deuteronomy, it talks about you will be in astonishment. You'll be in a land that's not of yours, and you'll be in astonishment, like athletes or Sarah Baartman, or, you know. And so it's just like, you know, because, you know, I got a friend, he's a Hebrew Israelite, you know, I don't agree with everything they say, but it's just really interesting if you do look at the Bible from that perspective of almost like a history book of us. It's really interesting because I'm like, man, that connects. I'm like, we are kind of an astonishment.
Not kind
you know?
of.
You know, it's like we're in astonishment. And like, if we ever try to do something that's not in that lane of entertainment, you know, you kind of get that slap on the wrist. Like, hold up.
Yeah. I feel like the response I've gotten a lot here doing the work that I do around blackness has been like almost a shock that I'm doing and it's surprising to me because I don't know if it's maybe a regional thing a little bit, but
yeah, I think so. It's probably a little bit regional, especially here in Wichita, because you're from, you know, Virginia, 757. Like, what would you say are the big differences from? And I know it probably was a struggle trying to make that switch out here.
I mean, so Virginia has its own stuff, right? You talking about a place where our field trips every single year were to Jamestown, plantations. So
oh wow,
we that was literally, we regularly going to where the enslaved people were brought in and seeing where they were working in the fields and stuff like that, reenactments and stuff like that. Like, so Williamsburg, there's like a Colonial Williamsburg, that is a huge part of Virginia, a draw for tourists and stuff. So it's not to say that like we are also better than, you know, Kansas or which are, because that's, yeah, but because I've really been thinking about that a lot lately. Like, why were we doing? I mean, goodness gracious! And the problem with it is the full history wasn't being told. It's one, because I remember one time my mom was. This is probably where I get this from, but my mom was a chaperone, and they kept referring to the slaves as indentured servants, and it's like, yes, there were indentured servants, but that's not that's not what we were. And so my mom called the tour guide out, you know, and of course me as a child, I'm all like embarrassed, want to shrink down because I just don't want any attention drawn. But she was not having it. She
was like, "You gonna tell the full story here?"
Yeah, but you know, my mom wasn't on every tour, so the number of people who heard that and then go off believing that,
and it was, that reminds me like when Corinthian, your husband, was on the podcast when he said, if we have other people teaching our history, you know, I feel like really at the end of the day we just have to start taking back, you know, what is ours. We have to start employing our own people. We have to start teaching our own history, because we're like one of the few groups that does it, you know. And so then it's just like, how can we get back in that position like how it used to be back in ancient times and even back in recent times, like 100 years ago?
Yeah. Yep.
What would you say is like some of your favorite parts about being Black, you know? What do you like about being Black?
Listen, I love being Black. I learned that last year when I started doing the Black in One Piece interviews, and they weren't meant for like visual podcasts. It was just, I thought I was writing a book.
Audio first?
Yes, I thought it was going to be for a book. But I did like 30, 40 interviews that I'm working through that content to still get it out in some way, because they were valuable conversations. But I learned it. So it reminded me of when I was doing my qualitative research for school, and how as a researcher you have to be mindful of your bias, because I'm going into these conversations like we all love being Black the same, like, you know, and that's just not the case. And a lot of it had to do with people's experiences that they've had,
absolutely,
which I totally get. Me personally, even with those, I don't internalize like the negative experiences that I've had that I know are because I'm Black. I don't internalize them in a way where now I don't like being Black. To me, that's all about that person and stuff that they got going on, issues that they haven't worked through, ignorance on their end. And if anything, it makes me love being Black even more, because I'm like, you big mad, because this is so great, you know.
Do you think maybe that's really what it comes down to? This other cultures are envious of us. Like, you know, I even realized, like, you know, I heard something, and I don't know how factual this is, but it said kind of like even like the name Caucasian was because possibility of them coming from the Caucasus Mountains. And so when they came out of the Caucasus Mountains, they saw the pyramids and music and culture, and they're like envious of it. And they decided to take, you know, I always say like Black people, we never were a caveman, because how would we be this pigment? And so you put one person in a cave, one person in the sun, you tell me what color they gonna be. And so then I just like, you know, and like I said, I don't all the way believe that, but I heard that before. But it's just interesting, because like, what if that's true? Because how could we be in a cave like this color? You know, so like, whose history are you talking about when you say caveman? Like, how could this be possible? We had abundance and fruit falling from the trees. We didn't even really eat animals like that. You know, we learned a lot of this stuff from having the European lens on. Like, if I wear your glasses, I'm not going to be able to see. You know, so like, how do we take off this European lens? You know, or is it just already like...
Yeah. It's really like a sick, twisted cycle, to be honest with you, because a lot of so I believe we would be great regardless, right? But like Dr. Kevin Harrison X said, a lot of the culture and the things that people want so bad, it is born out of some of the harder aspects of our experience. And it's like, there's a disbelief almost that how could y'all still be here? How could y'all still be, not just still be here and standing, but still be
producing and
thriving and just beautiful and finding ways to still connect, even though we've tried to take all this stuff away from you. You know what I mean? That we're your connectors or whatever. We still gonna find a way. How do y'all like Dr. Harrison said, still just kind of look at each other and know like that? They don't have that. I mean, at least I don't believe. And it reminds me of like how we have the meeting after the meeting, right, at work and stuff like that. Or just the things that we know without saying anything. Like it's so true. And I think it's like they have FOMO, basically.
Yeah. I think that's that spiritual connection we have, you know. Like I always said, spirituality is, the unseen science, and science is the seen spirituality, right? So like we've always knew this for thousands of years, and they're just kind of getting now started, because there was a time where we were, on top. And I think that we still have some way of, without knowing, a connection to that realm of just being able to have that connection, Yeah.
I think that it's also the ways that the connection shows up. So for example, in the toxic workplace that I was at, there was a situation where they were trying to, long story short, like get me to throw this other Black woman under the bus, right?
Really?
And there was some things that had happened that I didn't know her very well. So I wasn't sure if it was her or surrounding circumstances, but it was some stuff that had went down that wasn't cool. I was a little bit irritated with her team, but there was no way in the world that they were going to get me to throw another Black woman under the bus the way they were, because they were basically trying to push her out or whatever. Not happening. Not with me. Y'all can do what y'all want. And so it was almost like my supervisor could not reconcile. She could not understand how. Yes, I'm venting because I'm irritated that some of the things that her and her team have done have impacted my work.
Right.
But that's business, is professional. I'm sure there's reasons why those things are going on, whether I know what they are or not, whether I understand them, whether I like them.
Was this in the higher education?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I'm like, but that is not going to lead me to now try to get rid of her and help you have another Black woman unemployed. Absolutely not.
They wanted you to be an Uncle Tom, or
they wanted me. Yeah. So my thing is, they don't get that. They don't get how, I don't know. I didn't know her like that. I knew who she was clearly, but in our work cross paths, but I don't believe that they have that same level. Even if you look at like the different waves of feminism, so much of it is rooted in, that's why we had to end up having womanism, because so much of feminism was rooted in just individuality, not collective wellness or whatever. Whereas when you look at womanism, it's more about, yes, we're fighting for women's rights, but we're trying to fight for our rights, our collective rights, in a way that's going to ultimately better the whole of us. You know what I mean?
Right.
And there's a difference in your approach and everything when you're looking at it from a more individualistic compared to collective approach.
So what's the difference between feminism and womanism?
So feminism, feminism has multiple waves, and part of that is because they were not getting it right, and they kept, over the decades trying to do things differently. But at the end of the day, especially first wave feminism, it was focused on women's right to vote, right? Just basically kind of trying to get those basic rights that men already had that women didn't. But it was white women. It was not Black.
It wasn't our battle.
Right. So it was white women. And not saying that we weren't, because I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Okay. And one of our first acts of public, service and activism was marching in the women's suffrage march. But my point is that the feminists, their efforts as a whole, those white women, they was not worried about Black women.
Absolutely not. I weren't worried about us. And so then why do we adopt that? Why do we adopt feminism if it wasn't ever born to represent Black women?
So but that's where you will see different academics and other activists talking about Black feminism, or you have womanism, which was born out of this is not for us. And this, you see when Black women doing this all the time. We are forced to try to operate and exist and live and be in spaces that are not made for us. And at some point we get sick and tired of it. And it's like, you know what? We off that. This is what we're gonna do, and that's basically what happened with womanism in there being, because when you look at like second wave feminism, third wave feminism, they're slowly but surely trying to weave in other aspects of women's struggle, but it still never really prioritized Black women. And so going into now, I think we're in like fourth wave feminism.
It's like the fifth, I think.
Fifth, it's on and on, but it's now at some point they were saying, okay, yeah, now we do want to include, women of all backgrounds and a more diverse approach to fighting for these rights. But what makes womanism stand out is that it's rooted in intersectionality. So that idea,
it's more like a collectiveness, because you're saying feminism is more about individuality.
Yes, that's how it started, and I mean they've tried to pivot over the years. And I'm not trying to drag nobody who's a feminist or anything like that. I'm just saying, being real about the history of it. It always was had more of an individualistic. Which, when you think about America, that's a whole nother conversation, but that's how our society operates.
Let's talk about that, because now you bring in a good point that I'm thinking about. So it sounds like to me you're saying feminism is more about individual self, and like I see a lot of times in our society now, like how that can be problematic.
I mean, so to me, it's a time and place for everything, right? And so I don't have a problem. I have many friends who travel alone and things like that. Now, me personally, my anxiety won't allow for that. I'm just that's not my my path. But I'm not mad at anybody else who does it.
But just like my thing is just like, if everybody's having a hot girl summer, who watching the kids?
But see, why you always got to default to hot girl summer? What about men who are out here having whatever y'all call it? I don't know.
I don't know what do they call it. but what do they call it?
I don't know.
We just always having one, I guess.
That's
every
what
summer.
I'm saying. See,
just always having one, because but like on to that point, like what could be the downsides of feminism, if there's any?
I mean, to me, just looking at feminism historically, the downside I think that it as a movement to try to fight for rights is great. Anytime you're trying to do that. But also, anytime you're dealing with humans, human beings, there's going to be some area for improvement. And the fact that, like I said, there have been all these different waves. Clearly, there are individuals that are parts of the movement who recognize some of those blind spots and just areas for growth, and there have been efforts in that way. But again, the root of what you're doing was never meant for us. And so to me, that's why for me, like when I did my dissertation, one of my like theoretical frameworks and the things that was driving my research and the way I approached my findings and stuff and analysis was womanism. And it's a book called Black Feminist Thought by Patricia Hill Collins that is really what I rooted my work in, because it accounts for like standpoint theory and this idea of like outsider within. So how a lot of times we are in situations, we have both an outsider and insider perspective on things, because and then that goes back to W.E.B. Du Bois and his idea of double consciousness. So all these concepts that speak to how we have to kind of be like,
we gotta have a triple consciousness. Yes, I feel like almost
in all situations we're having to account for our own heart and mind, but also being mindful of like what is being placed on us as an expectation or assumption that's often rooted in falsehoods. It's so much that we have to account for.
That's why I said triple consciousness. Now, like, he got to be thinking about this and that.
And this is what my friends and we always say, like, literally we should be able to list these things like on our resume as skills, and people should start doing it because to be able to do that, to be able to operate in a space where you're constantly having to account for not just your own feelings and emotions, but that of others who are not able to and have never been required to regulate them.
Yeah, it's a choice for them. They don't have to, unless they go to like a black church on a Sunday. Because they're like, we always have to. Especially living in the place like where we live in Kansas, like you have to be able to do this. You have to be able to go to Walmart, and there's going to be a lot of white people. We always have to adapt, but I think that just makes us stronger. It's another skill, as you say.
It's a skill.
It makes you stronger to realize we're able to adapt, and that's how we're still here thriving and moving around.
Absolutely.
So, but like we say, womanism, like I'm still unclear exactly what that is, because this is a new term to me.
Yeah, so womanism, I don't want to say it's because I don't want to offend, but it's but womanism is basically an approach to some of these issues where the lack of rights and things like that Black women was experiencing that weren't being addressed by feminism. And it takes an approach that's rooted in intersectionality, which talks about the overlapping experience of racism and sexism, and also taking into account socioeconomic status. So it's really looking at the whole person in all aspects of your identity that could contribute to barriers and oppression that you're experiencing. Where compared to feminism, it really was solely, in the beginning, I'm a white woman and I want to be able to vote. I should be able to do these things too. Right. This is true. You should be able to. But there were other women that also should have been a part of that, and that were being forced out for multiple aspects of their identity. So that, I mean, that's very summarized. So womanism is kind of more centered for Black women. For Black women, exactly. Okay. So it was, so it was for Black women. And, but you got to keep in mind, though, too, that one of the, I would say, core tenets was that, yes, while we're doing this for Black women, we also have a long-term end goal of the work that we're doing being beneficial for the larger collective. So you'll see it as an approach used when you're talking about LGBTQIA rights, rights for Black men as well, fighting for Black men. So not just so myopic, What
I was going to ask you too, I wanted to kind of change gears a bit and kind of go talk about relationships. You know, you're married to Corinthian, obviously a beautiful relationship, and there might be some people watching right now who are fearful of marriage, and I think, I'm definitely an advocate for marriage, and I was curious to what have you learned about yourself being married and to Corinthian, or just being married? What have you learned about Tasha?
What I've learned about me through marriage, I wouldn't even say it's something that I've learned per se. Stuff that I've known always. I know that I'm a whole lot. Just as a person.
How'd you meet Corinthian?
I met Corinthian because his brother and I went to high school together.
Daryl?
Nope. He has another brother, Arthur, who's still back in Virginia. So we went to a magnet school, and that's why they weren't at the same school. Okay, yeah. But at the time, I just happened to see them walk by at one of the schools we were at, and I was like, "Oh, I didn't know Arthur had a brother." I was like, I literally said, "I didn't know he had a twin." That's what I was saying to myself. I was like, I didn't know he had a brother, and and he looked kind of good or whatever. Then we ended up being, because everybody would be in the same hotel, and so we came out one morning, and Corinthian came out, and he just had on a little white t-shirt, and I was like, hey, but no. So at some point,
so you approached him?
No, at some point while we were on that road, because it's a week on the road. Yeah. Arthur introduced him to me and was like, hey, this is Tasha. We went to high school together, da-da-da. And that was pretty much it. Then, but he told Corinthian then, I guess, to contact me, and he didn't. And so I saw Arthur a few weeks later at a panel we were doing. And I was like, your brother never reached out to me. And he was like, oh, because he said he saw on your Facebook that it's complicated. And so I was like, no, whatever, that situation it's not, I'm gonna change that. And so that day, my drive home after that panel, it was a 3-hour drive home, Corinthian called me and we talked the whole drive home. And I won't say the rest is history, because we dated for a long while. Then we had some makeup to break up. But this is part of my story that I share, in terms of I really had to get to a point where not even just about Corinthian, but I had just been in relationship after relationship after relationship, and I just needed to take time for me. And this was around the time that I started therapy for the first time, and that was a game changer. And so then when me and Corinthian did spin the block, as they say, I was better prepared and healthier in my mind and spirit to enter into something long term and everything.
And this is before Ph.D. grad school. Or is this all
no,
during the
I
same
have my
time?
PhD at this point.
Yeah, okay, yeah. PhD.
So, Corinthian, if you look at my my dissertation, the bound, or you can pull it up online, he's in my dissertation, because we were dating at that time. He was in there most of the times when I was writing my dissertation. Okay. So he's in there in terms of I was saying, I hope we can spend our life together.
So this was after you moving in with Dad and all that stuff when you met Corinthian, or kind of around that?
So I met Corinthian in 2009.
Okay.
Early on. So all that other stuff, like we weren't together when all that happened with me losing the job and stuff.
Got you.
But he was there for me though. You know what I mean? Like, cause I literally, when I lost the second job, I went straight to his, we were in the Richmond area. I went straight to his apartment because I was just so distraught. I was so unexpected. So I appreciated him being there for me then, but we weren't together at that time. So
what do you think really kind of helped to get you over that hump though? Because there's obviously people tuning in right now who might still be in that, that
are you talking the work piece?
Well, just as far as the work, losing 2 jobs, like there was, other than like God and therapy, there had to be something else that kind of made you want to continue to keep going. Because some people, they just stop. Like I see clients like that, and it's like, hey, like we gotta keep going, but something pushed you.
I would say, I know you're probably sick of hearing about her, but I mean, Amber, she probably doesn't even realize she ended up sending me. I don't know if it was for my birthday. It had to have been, or it might have been my like graduation gift or something. Yeah. But at any rate, she sent me this book of devotionals, and inside the book, she had put $100, which she has no idea how much that helped me. Because I mean, I didn't have at that point, I was literally just paying my phone bill because in case somebody called me for a job, and my car insurance, I think, and so she sent me that, and I never had been like one. I didn't grow up in the church or anything like that, so I never was one that did devotionals and things like that. So it was something different, But I'm like, okay. And she sent me. She also had put this long note that I cherish to this day, just so encouraging and supportive. So I mean, I know it might sound small, but I read that note regularly. I actually started reading and doing the devotional every day. That's really all I had in me at the time. I didn't have a whole lot more in me I just didn't. And so that kind of kept me. But also, so this is something that probably a lot of people don't know. I talked about how I worked at Baskin-Robbins in high school and all through undergrad. When I moved back in with my dad never said like, oh, you better get a job. But I know my dad. Like, so it wasn't like I was going to, he might have given me like some weeks, maybe a month to get myself together and mourn and do whatever I grieve and everything. But at some point you got to find you a job. Absolutely. And so I always have been looking, and I'm looking for jobs that are appropriate for like my level of education and all that kind of stuff, my experience and all that. But at the end of the day, I just needed some money to come in. Absolutely. So I had picked up like substitute teaching, but anybody who knows me know I don't do kids for real. So that was a struggle for me. But you got to do what you got to do. But so I only picked up like a couple of jobs, and I was like, you got to find something else because you're not going to do this consistently for real. For sure. So then he had told me about like this guy that he knew that had like cleaning jobs. That never kind of like panned out. But what I did, I said, you know what I do know is ice cream. And so there was a local, there was a Baskin-Robbins that was like right around the corner from where he lived. And coming to find out, she had just bought the one I worked at in high school, which was like the town over. And then she had bought that one. And she hired me, and I worked there until I got the job with the Department of Education. Hey, and I share that because people a lot of times like
sometimes gotta
feel like
yourself.
Something is like beneath them or whatever. Right. And I'm like, one thing, like my parents, like I don't know, my parents always, because even when I said I've been working since like 14, 15, even younger than that, my mom and my dad had picked up like cleaning jobs or whatever, and they would be bringing us right along with them. And so from that young age, I was picking up trash and doing that kind of work or whatever.
It's kind of just pretty much humbling yourself, like realizing like
it was never that was never a thing to like. I'm gonna do what I have to do to get some coins by or whatever. But I know a lot of people who they're not doing that. Oh yeah. And it's like for me, not only did that give me some coins to just get me through, it gave me something to do. It kept me from just being in that room all day.
You got routine, you got structure. Yes. Why do you think some people can't be able to just go ahead and do something like that, like what you did? I
mean, depression is real, and so like I know you know that, but so it's like I don't want to dismiss that. Like sometimes it could get so deep that like you yourself alone can't pull yourself out of it. I'm just thankful and grateful that even with my relationship with my dad being what it was, and with, his wife, all of that kind of stuff, that I had somewhere to go, And so I just read a post someone made about how when we tell our stories, we got to stop telling, this isn't the word that she used, but she was like, we got to stop telling like stock stories where we like, oh yeah, I got it out the mud all on my own, da 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 da. When the reality is that there's a lot of other factors at play that contributed to your overall story. Whether or not that does well on social media is a different story.
And you call it what kind of stories?
I can't remember the word that she used, but I'm just saying stock stories, like how we have stock photos or whatever that you can
stock. Yeah.
But I'm like, her point was that be for real, like
be all the way real about exactly what happened, because you just telling part of the story.
Exactly.
You know, but what's the other part of the story?
Exactly. And so I say that because, like, yes, it was a struggle, but I could never say that I pulled myself out of that by myself. There were so many.
That's that pride.
Yeah.
The pride wants to do that. You know, people say I did that, but like, you know, other people did that. God did that.
Yeah.
God brought other people in your life to pull you up, you know. So I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, you know. I know there's one question I was curious about. I know probably Corinthian's curious too, but you say you don't do kids. And I know you guys don't have any kids. But what's your thoughts about, you know, about kids, you know, like no pressure, but I mean, before we get going, like, you know, could this be in the future?
No. So
he's like,
no.
Sorry, Corinthian. I'm sorry, bro.
No. So Corinthian's aware, you know, I just never had that like desire. I've never had that desire for kids. Like I have friends and know women who was like, oh, I can't wait to be a mom, or I really want to. I never felt that.
Right. I appreciate you being honest about it. And, you know, like, because sometimes people feel like, oh, you're a woman, you should want to have kids, but there's women out there who don't want to.
And that's what I talk about.
And it's not because out of fear.
No.
But it's because out of love.
I mean, that one of the things I talk about in the Witcher Talks is that it's like I can't force myself to have a desire for something that I just don't have a desire for. And then that's how you end up seeing some of these situations where somebody has children and then they are like, you know, miserable or, you know, don't really want them. So it's like, I'd rather just live in my truth. But taking it back to your questions around me and Corinthian and marriage and stuff, that is something that he expressed earlier on in our relationship of wanting children and everything. And I feel like I was upfront with him. I think that's important because it's like, I'm not trying to mislead anybody. In addition to me just not having that desire, I had fibroids, right? Which are heavily prevalent amongst Black women. Yes. And, so my mom, my grandmother, some of my aunts had them and all ended up having surgeries. And, but all of them also had children. And so when I realized that I had fibroids, the first thing I told them was, we can go ahead and go to having surgery because I don't want children. Like we can go ahead and just take that. But I was only 22, I think, or 23. And so every doctor that I saw was like, absolutely not. No. Like you're too young. You're going to want to have kids someday. You're going to meet somebody who wants to have kids someday. And it was just super frustrating because it goes back to the conversation that is still being had around women's autonomy around their bodies and stuff. So
you're saying that you had the fibroids and they didn't want to operate on you because they wanted you to still be able to have babies.
They would, so there's a wide array of procedures that you can have done. But the most extreme of them would be a hysterectomy, which is where you wouldn't be able to have children anymore. And I was saying, I don't want to deal with this. I know I don't want children. Let's just go ahead and do that. And they were like, no. So I ended up having over more than a decade, pretty much every surgery and treatment that you could have for fibroids. But even when you remove them, they typically will return. Really? And so they'll continue to grow back.
You still deal with that now?
No. So fast forward, and I finally ended up having, like, I guess they realized, like, okay, you're old enough now. It's been 12 plus years of you dealing with this quality of life trash. Yeah. Like, and so finally they said, and so you have to think over the course of this 12 years is me and Corinthian's relationship just going through different situations and us being together and not. So when we came together this last time, me for myself personally, I had been known, but I also now had the go ahead from a doctor that you can have the surgery. So before it was more of an abstract, and it's like, so even if I tell a guy that I'm dating, hey, I don't intend to have children, I don't want children, I'm probably going to have this surgery, it still maybe probably, you know.
So now you got the surgery done.
So I had not got the surgery yet. I was supposed to have it, and then COVID hit. And I was like, oh, you're not going to find me in a hospital. And so then engaged, come out here. And so now, like I was saying, having to find all my doctors over again and really having I've had so many surgeries, going under, all that kind of stuff doesn't bother me, but just knowing that I'm coming to a predominantly white area, and not saying that like all black doctors are good and all white doctors are bad. Absolutely not. Right. But just also being aware of the statistics around black women's health and treatment and care, and how it's the numbers are not good. And so I was concerned about that. Thankfully, the Lord blessed me to find someone immediately that I felt comfortable and safe with to have the surgery. So we scheduled it for the winter of 2022 and had that. But I bring up me and Corinthian coming back together, and the importance of me having taken that time for myself and just becoming more like secure and firm in who I was in my path in life, because I was able to. I would have been sad, of course, if we weren't able to move forward. But it was imperative that we have that conversation, like for real, about I'm not going to go into a situation with you in I don't want to say steal, but like you not have the opportunity to pursue that parenthood or whatever as something that's really important to you. If that's something that you really want to do, I would never want to be in that situation, because I feel like that's how resentment and all kind of stuff.
So let me just make sure I'm hearing this right. So you were all through life, you never really had that desire, right? And then two, you had this condition, so then it's kind of made it difficult. But then finally, you wanted to get the surgery. Then COVID came, 2020. But then you eventually did go through with the surgery,
right? So I wanted to have the surgery since I was 23
because it was painful.
It's painful.
It's painful dealing with that.
It's like when I talk about quality of life. Just the constant, as a woman, like I'll just be honest with you, like I would wear black all the time because you just never knew. And it's like, who wants to go through life like that? Like I could never really be comfortable anywhere I'm going. And a lot of the jobs that I worked required travel. So that was a whole nother thing.
And what's the proper name of the condition? Is it just...
It's fibroids. Uterine fibroids.
That's what it is, uterine fibroids.
And, but like I said, and then at different points in time, like doing all these different surgeries. And so I got to a point near the end where I was like, listen, I'm not doing another surgery that's temporary. Like I'm sick of y'all like cutting into me. Like every time you have a procedure, it's trauma to your body. Like I'm sick of it. And so like I said, finally I met a doctor. This is back home, but then COVID hit. So then around that time or a little bit later is when me and Corinthian reconnected, and so now we're having conversations around that. And so, it all worked out and was fine. But one of the things I shared in the Witcher Talks was just how we have now, like, when you talk about curating your life, it's, for me, my babies have always been my godchildren and then my nieces and nephews. I previously only had one nephew, but now through marriage have multiple. And I love it. I love being able to be the auntie that spoils, and for the little ones, being able to get them, take them right on back.
Man, people don't talk about, hey, y'all living your life though, because now, like you said, like with the condition, you can't have kids, but at the same time, never really wanted kids. Right. Corinthian's cool with this, so it works out, no resentment.
And I love that Corinthian's so involved in the community. So we often talk about how the other way that we quote unquote parent or whatever, or show up for the youth is just me with my teaching, or like I did Upward Bound Math Science last summer. Absolutely. Corinthian is so involved in the community with Heroes Academy and other initiatives, and like he loves doing the
and y'all both be doing so much. It's hard to follow. Like I need like a bullet point, like what y'all do day in and day out. But I really appreciate you coming on the show. You're a basket of knowledge. You have a lot of information, and you know how to articulate yourself very well.
Thank you.
And you're doing your podcast thing too. And I'm more than happy to be able to help you out with all the behind the scene things, because a lot of people don't realize how much we put in it. And I don't know about you, but I don't get a check for these episodes.
No.
How can everybody be able to get a hold of you, right? How can they get a hold of you to reach out if they're interested in, like, the services you provide, and maybe even share what services you do provide?
Sure. So you can reach me at Dr. Tasha at tmbpmedia.com. You can also visit themillennialblackprofessor.com, and there's a services tab that you can go to, and that will allow you to either book a free consultation with me, or you can fill out the service inquiry form, and it has all the different options there. And then if you're interested in following TMBP Media, you can find us on YouTube at TMBP Media. It's at TMBP Media everywhere.
The MVP. How about that? The MVP right here from the 757. to the 316. If you guys made it this far in the episode, make sure you smash that subscribe button. Like, share, subscribe. Share this video with somebody. Like we talked about, we're not getting paid for these conversations. The only thing we ask is if you just share this video, or even if you could comment this video. So we just really appreciate it. Once again, the MVP in the building right here, Dr. LaTasha Kelly. Man, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
This is the Fully Connected Podcast. Everything's fully connected, and make sure you guys stay fully connected as well. So we'll see you guys on the next episode. Peace. Fully Connected.